Learning to mountain bike is a rewarding process, but it's not without frustrations. Experienced riders can make impossible sections of trail seem like a walk in the park. This can be discouraging to a new rider who's struggling with seemingly basic sections of trail. But these riders were in your place at one point. Today, we're going to cover everything you need to know as a beginner. I'll clue you in on some secrets and help make the learning process a bit less frustrating. For this video, I'm going to be using this GT Avalanche. GT, of course, is one of my channel sponsors, but today we're going to be using this bike, which you can find at your local Dick's Sporting Goods store. Like many other entry-level mountain bikes, this mountain bike comes with a 3x drivetrain. There are 3 gears in the front and 9 in the back, giving us upwards of 27 different gear combinations. And if you're not familiar with this kind of shifting, this can be somewhat overwhelming. In the front, the smallest gear is mainly used for climbing, while the biggest gear is mainly used for commuting on the road or really fast sections of trail. But most of our riding will take place in the middle gear. This will give us enough range for tackling small climbs, while also giving us enough resistance for tackling most descents. Now, it should be noted, there are several gear combinations that we never want to use. As you can imagine, chains aren't very good at moving side to side. A good rule of thumb is when in the easiest gear in the front, avoid using the 3 hardest gears in the back. And when in the hardest gear in the front, avoid using the 3 easiest gears. Though these days, many bikes are ditching the front derailleur, coming equipped with a single gear in the front and a large range cassette in the back. This effectively gives the rider the same gear options while simplifying the shifting process. Regardless of how many gears your bike has, how and when you want to shift remains the same. Shifting under load is when a rider shifts while putting a lot of force through their pedal. When you shift under load, it'll sound like this. This is a noise your derailleur will make when asking you for mercy. Instead, we need to anticipate when we need to shift and shift when we are pedaling lightly. On a similar note, you need to be pedaling in order to shift. It's also a good idea to only shift 1 or 2 gears at a time. Your cassette has these dedicated ramps that help shift from one gear to the next, and they only come around once or twice per revolution. These days, even entry-level mountain bikes come set up with disc brakes. You only need your index fingers to bring you to a full stop. If you find that difficult, you may need to move the brake lever away from the grip. This will make the brake lever easier to pull. And on the lever blade, there's a reach adjust screw which determines how far in and out the lever is. This helps accommodate riders with different size hands. In general, you want your lever blade to be in line with your forearm when you're in your riding position. Many riders tend to over-rely on the rear brake. This causes them to skid. Once your tire breaks traction, you lose all your stopping power. If you find yourself skidding, let off the brake a little bit until your tire regains traction. That being said, most of your braking power will come from your front brake. It's pretty understandable for new riders to be a bit hesitant to grab the front brake, but as long as you keep most of your weight on your feet and your head behind a steer tube cap, you should have no problems. It's also worth noting that our brakes are not binary. They're not just on or off. We can apply a little or a lot of stopping force depending on how hard we grab the lever. Needless to say, you want to get used to how your brakes behave before you actually need them. When descending, there are 2 main types of turns we'll run into: flat turns and turns with a bank, which are better known as berms. Either way, in both types of turns, we want to keep our chest low and our arms slightly bent to lower our center of gravity, while keeping our head up to see where we're going. On a related note, many riders have the tendency to look straight in front of their front wheel. Whether it be turning or riding in a straight line, looking further ahead gives us more time to anticipate trail features and react accordingly. On flat turns, it's a good idea to drop your outside foot. This will give your tires better traction and also lower your center of gravity. The more weight you have directly above the contact patch of your tire, the more your tire will want to dig in and the better traction you'll have. On the other hand, in berms, since the terrain is banked, we're usually not as concerned with traction, and instead we are resisting the g-forces of the turn, so in most cases we'll keep our feet level. That being said, sometimes the berm is not quite steep enough for the amount of speed we're carrying. In those situations, we may drop our outside foot to try to get a little bit more traction. Regardless of the turn type, we want to do most of our braking before we get to the turn. Applying the brakes while in a turn makes it very difficult for our tires to get any grip. This can cause us to wash out. When climbing switchbacks, many beginner riders tend to hug the inside of a turn. But as you can see from watching this video, both our front and back wheels take 2 different paths. Let your front wheel swing out wide to make the turn easier. Another thing to consider is that you don't always have to be pedaling. In fact, coasting is one of the best ways to get over certain obstacles. But when you do coast, be sure to keep your pedals level. This will minimize the chances of your pedals clipping protruding obstacles on the trail. In addition to that, don't be afraid to stand up and get out of your saddle. Even if it's only for a split second, it makes a big difference. This also applies to climbing. Don't be afraid to get up out of your saddle to ascend a quick punchy hill, get up over some chunky roots, or to help shift your weight while getting up a ledge. When descending though, most of our time is going to be spent standing up. Standing up will allow us to shift our body weight around to absorb the terrain. For that reason, it's a good idea on any long descent to drop our seat. This will give our legs more range of movement and allow us to get over rough terrain without getting caught up on our seat. One of the more important concepts to consider is light hands, heavy feet. That means you don't want to be leaning on your handlebars. Instead, you want to keep the majority of your weight on your feet. This will allow your front wheel to smoothly roll over rough terrain without it getting caught up. Ideally, you should be able to stand up on your pedals without using your hands for balance. This will ensure that your weight is centered between the two wheels and that you're not leaning on your handlebars. You'll find that the same technique applies to steep roll downs and even small drops. Line choice can make an easy section of trail difficult and a difficult section of trail easy. In this line, not only do I have to thread the needle through the rocks, but I also have to time my pedal strokes while leaning my bike around the tree. Notice how I quickly backpedaled here. That's called ratcheting. You use this when you need to time your pedal strokes or you can't get a full pedal stroke in. But this inside line makes it so I don't have to do any of that, and this makes that section much easier. In this section, the main line actually isn't too bad. However, if we look closely, there's a tricky root at the top. When wet, this root can cause issues. A less obvious line is to come inside and get our turning done later. This avoids that route altogether. Neither of these two line choices are wrong, but in this situation, the inside is certainly easier. On many switchbacks, if you look closely, there's an outside line on the high side of the turn. This outside line allows a rider to get most of their turning done earlier and reduces the chances of blowing out the turn. Sadly, I can't cover every aspect of mountain biking in one single video, so in the description below, I'll leave a link to some more beginner-friendly skill videos.